beautiful topics that we have not covered before. We've done a little bit something like this in the past, and we found that it's well received, alhamdulillah. So we're gonna dive into the concept of the divinely guided learning model that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about. And we're also gonna talk about the divinely guided planning process that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribes in the Quran. Those are topics that sound really far-fetched, but you will see they fit so beautifully into our thinking, and they go to show that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has included in this beautiful Quran so many types of knowledge and so much additional ways to think and reflect about the words of Allah that it is really stunning that people have missed it all of these years for the last 1400 years. Before we go too far, if you can give me a confirmation on the stream, on the chat stream, that you can hear my audio and you can hear my you can see my video well, I would really appreciate it. One more sort of reminder that inshallah, if you have questions that you'd like to put on the chat stream, you're encouraged to do so. Precede your question with 4 question marks and follow your questions with 4 question marks, so I can easily find them, and then we will get to those questions soon, shortly, inshallah. This live segment, inshallah, will include a lot of new knowledge, The title says metaphorical, masculine, and feminine in the Quran, but you will see we're barely able to touch that concept. You will try to understand it, and I encourage you to take the seeds of understanding that we're going to share with you in this introductory type of segment on the subject, and take it in so many different dimensions. And those of you who are already following our approach, following the methodology that we follow on this channel, the organic Quranic methodology, inshallah, you will be able to take the seed of an idea, which is the metaphorical masculine and the metaphorical feminine in the Quran, and you will run with this in directions that will open up amazing gushing well springs of new knowledge and new disclosures for you. Inshallah, you have been practicing this type of toiling, and you've benefited greatly over the last 3 years that this channel has been open. All right, without any further ado, let's get into the topic. So we're going to talk about the divinely guided learning and planning models according to the Quran. We're going to see it, but first we have to lay some foundation. We're going to do some basic knowledge formation, so to speak, using a key term, salala, and we're going to get into that. Before we do this, I just want to remind you of a short paragraph from Surah 53, which we covered in YT128. So we're going to review that paragraph from Surah 53, Surah An-Najm, very quickly, and then we're going to dive into the linguistic basis for the term salala, which is really critical so that we understand 2 other paragraphs. One paragraph from Surah 32, Surah As-Sajda, and another paragraph from Surah 23, Surah Al-Mu'minun. Really critical paragraphs. And then we're going to go into a summary that brings all of this home to the topic or the title that we talked about, which is how the masculine and the feminine models or metaphors play out in the Quran, and how we can apply that type of metaphor to the divinely guided learning and the divinely guided planning. I know there are lots of concepts in here, but this is the amazing part of the Quran, and I cannot keep this simple. As hard as I tried, I'm going to summarize it in a beautiful diagram to simplify it for you toward the end, but it's difficult. So please focus with me, stay with me as much as possible, avoid side chatting for your own benefit. For those of you who are joining us, please don't forget that we have a website, www.marvelousquran.org, where you can get the notes for this segment. For those of you who are joining us live, also, after the session is over, please remember to go down below the video and put comments. I would really appreciate it if you put a like. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. For those of you who are joining us later, also do the same thing. We would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for your support. All right, let's get into it. One quick reminder, standard for us on this channel. Please, if you are familiar with these ayat based on the traditional interpretation and translation, you have to forget about that for a while and just learn how the terminology based on the organic Quranic methodology that we use allows us to get into new areas of understanding, new realms of exploring possible meanings and possible applications of the ayat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We follow the organic Quranic methodology, which includes something called the nested interpretation. It includes using the Abrahamic locution, which is a special divine lexicon that Allah chose to use in the Quran, which is different than how these terms and vocabulary terms were used by the traditional Arabs of the 7th century. And we have been demonstrating this for over 3 years. So please be patient, allow yourself to learn, open your mind, as we say, empty your cup before coming in to learn from the source of knowledge, that's the Quran. You know, ascribing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala his due reverence requires that we start with an empty cup. We don't start with presumptions of what we should expect. We start with a real empty cup. So empty your cup, forget what you think you knew about these ayat, and just allow yourself to swim in the beauty and the power of the expressions that we're going to see. And then eventually, toward the end of this segment, inshallah, the applications, the learning model, and the planning model. And they're really stunning. If you stay with us all the way to the end, I promise you, you're going to be amazed. We use a technique called tafsil. Those of you who have been with us for a while know that this is the way we split the ayat, or we split the sentences in a grammatically safe way, but to understand the ayat in many different combinations that open up new ways of seeing the concepts and seeing the understanding. If you're not familiar with all of this, you're probably going to be frustrated. You're probably going to say, Dr. Hani is stretching it or pushing it, or inventing things. Of course, because you're not familiar with the methodology that we follow, with the step-by-step approach that's very rigorous, that is extracted and derived from the Quran. That's what we do. We don't make things up. We look at how the Quran guides us. You're going to learn today how the Quran guides us to learn, how it uses this feminine, masculine, metaphorical language to allow us to understand new things and to put our mind and our Weltanschauung, so to speak, our outlook, our worldview in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we can learn in collaboration with the malaika from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where we're going to go. And those of you who are advanced, toilers on the Quran, who work really hard to engage the Quran and learn, you're going to learn amazing things today. So if you are not familiar with how we engage the Quran, you're going to be frustrated. I highly recommend you don't watch this. You go back and watch YT93, or even before, YT46, and start from there going forward until you develop enough background and knowledge to catch up. And then you'll really enjoy this video. Even then, many of you will need to view this video several times so that you can really get to appreciate the depth of concepts and the advanced type of knowledge that this video shares. All right, so I look forward to your questions, but please wait until we get to the point where we have enough material to start asking questions. I would really appreciate it if you can keep your questions focused on the topic at hand today. All right, we're going to start with this paragraph from Surah An-Najm. We have covered this in YT128, which is part of the series on Al-Mahdi. You can find this segment on the channel page. Go back to the channel page, which is just clicking the name of the channel, Marvelous Quran, under the video. And then you can go to the channel page and look for YT128, and you'll find the full segment. This is just a small extract, small, very small, 10-minute extract. I'm not going to go through the video. I'm going to share with you the ayat. All right, so the ayat in Surah 53 starting at ayah 19. And those of you who have been with us for a while know that these ayat refer to the surah of Yusuf. And we've showed the direct link between this paragraph from surah 53 and the story of Yusuf, which is surah 12. So I'm going to go through them very quickly. أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى. Have you seen physically for yourself? أَرَأَيْتُمْ, أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ, which is the hamza on the line, indicates that this is physical seeing. Whereas if the hamza is on the alif, it indicates this is perception, sort of abstract type of seeing things in the abstract, in the conceptual world, not the physical world. But this one is the physical. So Allah is saying, you did not watch or see the physical Allat and the physical Al-Uzza. Again, please remember, throw away what you think you knew. What they told us in the traditional books of translation and tafsir are wrong, simply, very simply. It doesn't mean they're wrong about everything. It doesn't mean they're going to hell. It just means that they made mistakes. So we know more now, and we can actually bring the level of knowledge or the ceiling of knowledge higher to a point where we can see more of the Quran. This is one example. When the hamza of the verb ra'a is on the line, it indicates physical seeing. When the hamza is on the alif, ra'a with an alif and the hamza on top, it refers to the perception, to the conceptual type of seeing. So, أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ, have you seen yourself, allat and al-uzza? So allat is from the verb or the word lata, which means to say no or to refuse. So the naysayer, the one who refused, who is that one? As we described in the story of Yusuf, this is the prisoner who actually did not accept Yusuf's invitation to monotheism. If you remember, Yusuf ended up in prison, and with him two other people. Allat is the one who refused. Wal-Uzza is the one who was brought near to Al-Aziz, the king. And that's not Yusuf. And again, if you have not seen the story of Yusuf, which is 30 parts on our channel, you're going to be frustrated. But this is part of the background. So we're building, and we keep building with every new video. Al-Uzza is the one who is brought near by Al-Aziz. That prisoner ended up working close with the king, Al-Aziz. So Al-Aziz, the reverent one. It's like we say today to the king, Jalalatul Malik, Jalalatuhu, His Highness, or something like that. So the reverent one. This is the respectable one, Al-Aziz. So brought near by Al-Aziz is Al-Uzza. So those are the two prisoners. وَمَنَاةَ الثَّالِثَةَ الْأُخْرَى. Now here we have a feminine description. Manat, we'll come to the explanation of that term. الثالثة, clearly with a ta marbuta at the end, referring to a feminine label. And al-ukhra, referring to the third one, or one of the third ones, or one of the other ones. So in this case, clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using manat, the one upon whom beneficence was bestowed. And as we explained in Surah Yusuf, we proved clearly with clear references from Surah Yusuf itself that manat is not talking about idols that the Arabs respected at that time. The Quran is not dignifying the idol worshipping by the Arabs. Of course it's not. The words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all time and all place have nothing to do with the silly practices of the Arabs of the 7th century who used to practice idol worshipping to idols called Allat or Uzza or Manat. Whoever told us this is obviously mistaken. Allah is not dignifying their practices, of course. So Allat is referring to something in the Quran. We've demonstrated this is the one prisoner in the story of Yusuf who said no, meaning who rejected Yusuf's invitation to monotheism. Al-Uzza is the second prisoner, and Manat is the one who received beneficence, because we've demonstrated that Yusuf himself says in Surah Yusuf, قَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا قَالَ أَنَا يُوسُف وَهَذَا أَخِي قَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا مَنَّ. Allah has bestowed beneficence upon us. So this one, the third one who received beneficence, is Yusuf. Well, he's referred to in terms of the feminine. Pay attention. What does this have to do with the feminine and the masculine metaphor in here? In this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a clear indication that Yusuf is being referred to in terms of a feminine descriptor. Why? We're going to see. This is not something we're going to understand until toward the end of this segment. So I need you to be patient, but now we're just building observations. We're collecting our observations. Allah is referring to Yusuf using a feminine descriptor. Why? Because as we will see later, Yusuf is the source of learning, of knowledge. And we have seen this before in the story of Yusuf, itself. وَأَمَّا الْآخَرُ فَيُصْلَبُ فَتَأْكُلُ الطَّيْرُ مِنْ رَأْسِهِ. His lineage will be recognized and identified to be of noble descent, Yusuf, the son of Yaqub, etc., a prophet, and knowledge from his head will be shared from with the teachers, with the teachers, including At-Tayr, Al-Malaika, who will actually promote the type of learnings and knowledge that Yusuf shared with others. So Yusuf is a source. So think of that concept. The source of something is referred to as a feminine, as we see in here. So the third one in this group of 3 prisoners is referred to in terms of a feminine descriptor. So the metaphor is taking us in that gender distinction or differentiation, where the masculine, we will see, has a role to play, and the feminine has another role to play. And we're going to see a lot of details about this. I need you to be patient. This is a long segment, and we're going to be here for a while, so I need you to be relaxed, comfortable, and just fully in a receptive mode. Suspend your skepticism for a while until you hear the whole story, and then you'll start making up your mind. All right. So Allah continues in this paragraph, for you the male or the masculine labels, and you leave for Allah the feminine labels, meaning you're willing to accept this sentence, manat al-thalitha, the third one, al-ukhra. Usually al-ukhra, as we said before, is in the Arabic language, the traditional Arabic language, reserved for number 2, the second thing. So if you have a pair, the first one and al-ukhra, the other one. Well, in here, Allah clearly is using it with the third one. The third one happens to be feminine. So the third, which is one of the other ones, meaning the third, ukhra, the word ukhra, according to the Quran, doesn't mean the second of 2. In here, clearly, it means the third of 3. So this is against what traditional Arabs accepted in their own, locution or type of agreed upon norms in the use of their language. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is challenging them. You are willing to accept the untha in this sentence right here. Clearly, Allah is pointing it out. Clearly, the third is al-ukhra. But al-akhar in Surah Yusuf, how come you're not willing to accept the masculine version of this one, which is al-thalith, to refer to al-akhar. Al-akhar, in that case, is Yusuf, as we explained it again in the story of Yusuf. So here, this is really the introduction. تِلْكَ إِذًا قِسْمَةٌ ضِيزَةٌ. If you don't accept what Allah is using in here, الثالثة الأخرى, then your decision is arbitrary, inequitable. You're making up divisions from your own thinking. Whereas, according to the Arabic of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses these things, and He's putting in their face a reference of a descriptor, feminine, to be used for Yusuf. Why? We're going to see a little later in this segment. But now I'm just setting the stage, so you start thinking of these things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is challenging the Arabs with 2 things. He's challenging them with the fact that the word ukhra or akhar is not just the second of 2. In this case, clearly, the third of 3. And this is not typical in the standards of use for the Arabs. The second challenge is that he's referring to Yusuf, as we have demonstrated in the story of Yusuf, the series with 30 parts, that manat is a feminine reference with a feminine adjective al-thalitha and the feminine adjective al-ukhra. All of these 3 feminine labels, so to speak, refer to a man, Yusuf. So those are big challenges for the Arabs. Of course, the Arabs did not understand this. And that's why for the last 1400 years, we did not have a clear, insightful understanding of these ayat. Alhamdulillah, through the methodology, we're able to tease apart all of these issues and sort of rebuild a better understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to get us to see. All right, how do we know that this is all about labels and linguistics? Because the Quran itself tells us, إن هي إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان, which is the exact same sentence Yusuf uses in Surah Yusuf while he is in prison, as he's teaching his prison mates. The exact same marking, the whole sentence I'm highlighting in here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used that sentence from the speech of Yusuf in this ayah to make sure we get it. This is the exact same person and story that this paragraph is referring to. Again, all of this has been covered in YT128 and has been covered in the story of Yusuf. So what this paragraph says basically, or this sentence, they, meaning all the labels that the misguided interpreters apply to the Quran, in this case, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is challenging the Arabs. You accept the masculine in your own way, in your own interpretation, and in their interpretation, al-thalith or al-akhar in the story of Yusuf is referring to the other prisoner. But here we've proved al-akhar is Yusuf himself. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the third one is untha, feminine, al-ukhra. And here you accept it as the third one. How come the masculine, you don't accept the same thing in the story of Yusuf, al-akhar? So of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us they are but labels that you and your forefathers have named. You made them up. They're not necessarily part of the way Allah is using the Arabic language. And Allah continues, in which Allah has not instilled any authoritativeness. So Allah did not instill authoritativeness, pay attention, in the way the Arabs agreed and determined to use that language. Let me repeat it. This is very novel and shocking. Allah did not put authoritativeness in the humans who made up their minds and agreed to some sort of conforming standards, some sort of protocols on how to use that language. That's their decision and their problem. Allah chooses how to use the language, the Arabic language, the original, pure, pristine, fully, powerfully enabled Arabic language that the Quran employs, as we have demonstrated in dozens of videos already on this channel. So the uses of the Arabic labels in this case, including feminine versus masculine, is up to Allah. Now, can we now, part of As-Sa'a number 2, part of this group of people who are toiling on the scripture and the text of the Quran, can we extract from the Quran some nuggets that help us understand many different things? Notice what I just said. Can we extract some nuggets, some rules, some gushing well springs that if we apply them correctly, we can plug in many different questions, and get all sorts of answers, new answers to questions that have plagued the whole Islamic tradition for 1400 years. You notice that I'm starting to already use terminology that fits into the masculine and feminine. So can we extract some basic principles in which we can plug some questions or some investigations, and by doing so, we get a pairing that allows us to unleash and sprout all sorts of new understanding. You're starting to see the vision of how this metaphor is working. We're going to see it even more, but this is just one example that we've seen before. All right, let's continue with a more academic kind of linguistic basis. It's really not technical, so stay with me. It'll be only 1 or 2 minutes to make sure we're on solid ground for our brothers and sisters who are Arabic speakers and who may object to what we're saying. I just want to refer to all of the basic dictionaries and the lexicons that are available. You go to Al-Hawramani website and you can find this exact same concept. The root salala refers to extracting one thing away from its normal position from a group. So they said to pull or to pluck out, to extract something out of a group or out of a position it's in. So to take something out of a group or a position or a station or a state in which it is. So I'm adding the word furtively, and you'll see why, because the ayat in the Quran is teaching us that the concept of furtively, meaning secretly or sort of sneaking away, sort of pulling out without allowing anyone to notice you, that type of furtive concept is part of the word salala. As a matter of fact, those of you who are familiar with football, or what they call in the United States soccer, the traditional football for the rest of the world, football. In football, soccer, there is a concept of offside. So the whole team is making an aggressive move, and they're sort of on the offense to move the ball toward the opponent's goal. And the defense line is at a certain position. So the defense line is here. And if the offense is coming, if one of the players from the offense bypass the defense line, and then the ball is passed to that single individual, that's called offside. So in Arabic, they use the word tasallala, the exact same verb, salala, tasallala, which is he extracted himself, this one player extracted himself out of his own group, past the defensive line into the zone where he could illegally have a pass of the ball, bypassing the defense, and possibly scoring a goal, and that's considered illegal. It's called offside. So in Arabic, it's called tasallala. Another application is when let's say in a war, a group sends one or more members to get past the defensive deep into the enemy territory. That's called tasallala. Another meaning for that is to understand it from a point of view of when a group has a number of members and one or more of these members leave the group, sneaking out, pulling out secretly, furtively out of their group. That's also tasallal. So that's the meaning of salala or tasallala. I hope it's really clear. So there is furtively extracting one thing away from its normal position within a group or from a group. I hope it's really clear. So let's read this ayah to confirm that this is the right meaning. And we're not making it up. Dr. Hani is not making things up. We're going to see very clearly that this is how the Quran uses it in Surah 24:63, Surah An-Nur. By the way, this root, salala, is only used in 3 different positions in the Quran, places in the Quran. There is some question on whether or not it's used in other places. We will discuss it later. But basically, according to most linguists and scholars and grammarians who worked on this field, it's used three different places. We're going to see the 3 different places because it's really important. The concept is the beginning of understanding the learning model that we want to get to. And it's also the beginning of learning the planning model that we're going to get to. And you're going to see for yourself where I'm going with this. So salala is to extract or to pull out, either way. But basically, you have a concept of a group, and one or more members in that group are being pulled out or sneaking out or inserted. All of those concepts are possible as part of the root salala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us in this ayah 24:63. لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. By the way, there's a shadda in here, and it shouldn't be there because that shadda is strictly for the purposes of tajweed, the way you recite. So when I made the cut and paste, it came with it, but it shouldn't be there. لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. Don't render the invitation of the messenger among yourselves to be like your invitation to each other. دعاء بعضكم بعضا. By the way, you notice the word dua I'm translating it as invitation, because in the Abrahamic locution, it means both invitation and supplication, dua. So it makes us think, and I want you to pause this video if you're watching it later and reflect on this for just a few seconds. Dua means two things, and that's how we do it on this channel. It means invitation and supplication. What does that mean when we're making dua to Allah? We're inviting Allah. Inviting Allah, well, He's in control anyway, yes, of course, but we're inviting Him by allowing ourselves to offer back to Him everything He has given us. So that's the kind of beautiful spiritual concept. But here, I'm not going to dive too much into it. As I said, I want you to reflect on this. Don't let things like this pass without you taking advantage of this opportunity to reflect. Don't rush it. Take the time. Make it part of your daily qunut, which we've talked about many times before. Reflect on this. See how you can apply it in your life, and so on and so forth. لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول. Don't render the invitation of the messenger among yourselves to be like the invitation to each other. Now, if we apply dua to mean supplication, again, you can take this in so many new important dimensions. So don't make the supplications you learn from one another, or you hear from one another, or you make for one another using your own language. Don't make those supplications to be of the same value like the supplications you learn from the messenger. Well, what does that mean? Messenger is not with us right now. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a messenger, our messenger, he's not with us. Well, the Quran is our messenger. This shows again that the dua of the messenger, the Quran for us, is something really critical, something that we shouldn't dismiss. We shouldn't, underestimate. So the dua that we extract, the daily Abrahamic locution, which is something that we do on our website, www.marvelousquran.org. For those of you who are subscribed, you receive daily Abrahamic locution dua using the messenger locution and language. This is exactly a part of the justification for that. So we developed the dua using concepts like this. So this ayah is already telling us something extremely valuable about the linguistics. Now we go to the next one, next sentence. Allah may expose those of you who furtively extract themselves out, extract out, يتسللون. And we talked about salala and tasallala, all of these concepts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, قَدْ يَعْلَمُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ يَتَسَلَّلُونَ مِنْكُمْ لِوَاذًا. Allah may expose those of you who furtively extract themselves out from under the pretext of some excuse. Out under the pretext of some excuse. So what's going on in here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you are a group, and this group, he's speaking to them in a plural. لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم, among yourselves. So there's already a group. All right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that supplication, that invitation that you receive in the way of the messenger, in our case, the Quran, clearly, because the messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not with us. So how do we know what he's telling us? Well, we know what he told us as a Rasul through the Quran exclusively, end of the story. As a Nabi, you may tell me otherwise, but as a Rasul, he only brought the Quran, and you all know this. So this ayah is saying Rasul. So that means the Quran. So that means Muhammad, in his role of Rasul, is equivalent to the message that we have today, presuming, of course, in a provable way, that the Quran has never been modified, which we know that, and we have proven this, and it has been proven historically. All right. لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا. Now you are a group, you follow this rule. This is an important principle. قد يعلم الله الذين يتسللون منكم لواذا. Allah may expose those of you who furtively extract themselves out under the pretext of some excuse. In other words, furtively, they're sort of secretly pulling themselves, extracting themselves out of the group, just like that group of offensive team in soccer, in football. One of their team members is jumping out behind the defensive line, furtively, secretly, to receive a pass of the ball without fighting through the defensive line, and that's illegal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, if some of you do the same thing with your group, you extract yourself out from that affiliation with your group of believers. Why do we say believers? Mu'minun. Because this is talking about Rasul. And the followers of the Rasul, as we have explained many times before, are called believers. The followers of the Rasul. The followers of the Rasul are called believers. We know that. We have demonstrated this in so many different segments. Refer back to YT133, 134, the difference between Alladina Amanu and Al-Mu'minun, why Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a Nabi for Bani Israel, but he is a Rasul for us. All of those details. I know I'm frustrating some of you, but if you have not seen those videos, you're going to be frustrated, as I said at the beginning. So please refer back to those videos. So here, Ar-Rasul is mentioned. That means followers of the Quran. That means mu'minun. That means believers. So those who are extracting themselves out from affiliation with the group of believers. Well, what is that talking about? After talking about the invitation and the dua, scary concept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, if you are believers, you're following the Rasul, the Quran, the dua is an important part of the distinction that make your affiliation with the group of believers legitimate. A scary ayah, a very advanced ayah. It takes a lot of guts to really apply this ayah in the way we're talking about it. Many translations and many books of tafsir passed over this ayah, explaining it in ways that are basically circumstantial, that happened during the life of Muhammad, even though the ayah is clearly talking about Rasul. Rasul is way beyond the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ. Let those who dissent from his command be on notice, be warned. لَلْيَحْذَرْ. Now, unfortunately, most of the books of tafsir and the books of translation said amrihi. In here, amrihi, this had this pronoun of him, his, they said it refers to the messenger, meaning Muhammad. And that's really very unfortunate, because they're tying the commands of Muhammad, they're tying the commands of Muhammad to the punishment of Allah. And that's unfair, because the commands of Muhammad as a Nabi were applicable during his life. As a Rasul, he did not give commands. He just recited, وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. The messenger, the Rasul, is only required to deliver. To deliver what? To deliver the Quran. وَأُمِرْتُ أَنْ أَتْلُوَ الْقُرْآنِ. I was commanded to recite the Quran. As a Rasul, that's all he did. No commands. But as a Nabi, his commands were for his temporal restrictions, for his time. Just like Sulaiman's commands were for his time. Just like Dawood's commands as a Nabi were for his times, etc. So when we start understanding the concepts and the roles with their temporal constraints, we understand the Quran in a much more organized, disciplined manner. So clearly, amrihi does not refer in the abstract, in the absolute, to anything Muhammad said, everything Muhammad said. No, of course not. Amrihi is referring to amrullah, amru Allah. In here, Allah is mentioned. قد يعلم الله الذين يتسللون منكم لواذا فليحذر. Allah is providing this warning, this notice, that if you dissent from the command of Allah, which command of Allah? Don't do this, which is mentioned in the first part of the ayah, because then you will be subjected to tribulation or to stressful situations, fitna. And that stressful situation may also yield adhab alim, painful punishment of separation. So now this ayah is setting up the stage for us for understanding tasallala, to extract something out of a group. Now, we continue to the next paragraph from Surah 32. This is a short paragraph, but I want to go through it and again apply this new knowledge. So salala or tasallala, all of those are referring to extraction of one element from a group, or insertion. Sometimes it's used in the sense of insertion. All right, let's take 32:7, ayah 32:7. الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين. Allah who made insight laden, Allah has placed a lot of insight in everything He created. Already a beautiful spiritual concept. Just stop and pause and reflect on this. What does that mean? What is Allah telling us? Allah is telling us there are insights in everything He created. What does that mean? That means anything you touch, anything you approach to go learn about, there is insight in it. There is wisdom in it. There is novel ways to learn. Already we're seeing the learning process starting to happen. So just the word, it's just amazing. Allah chose ahsana, which means insight, not beauty, as they said about the story of Yusuf. You know, Allah clearly is ahsanul khaliqeen, as we will see in the next paragraph. Allah is not talking about His beauty. Astaghfirullah. Allah is talking about the insight He provided as a creator. Here, Allah is putting the word the word ahsana to place insight or deposit insight, and He made insight laden everything He created. Now, وَبَدَأَ خَلْقَ الْإِنسَانِ مِنْ طِينٍ. So we already see the relationship with learning. You should already be keeping that as sort of an environment, an ecosystem for what we're going to read next. I hope that makes sense. Ecosystem. Allah is setting up the stage that we're talking about insight. Insight means learning new things, learning deep things, wisdom, how to apply the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in novel ways. وَبَدَأَ خَلْقَ الْإِنسَانِ مِنْ طِينٍ. And he began the creation of the divinely guidable man, al-insan, from teen. And in the past, we have demonstrated that teen is a combination of dry earth, dry dirt, if you want, with some water. And we've applied this concept when we studied the story of Isa. We've applied this concept when we studied the concept of where all Nabiyun came from, which is from teen, and so on and so forth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this same concept now to show us how the creation was started. Well, the word khalaqa or khalq in the Quran is not only referring to the physical aspect of creation, as you all know, and we have seen this so many times before. So khalaqa is referring to the creation, not just physical, but intellectual and spiritual. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is adding a layer of intellectual growth, intellectual creation. So are we a new creation when we learn something new? Of course. We refer to ourselves as born again or recreated because we have discovered new things that make us a different human being than we were before that learning occurred. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using the same concept. So that's khalq, that's creation. So creation is not necessarily starting something from scratch or from zero or from nothing. No, creation is used in the Quran with incremental improvement and growth and, you know, novel kind of nature. So think about it this way. When you taste with your tongue a fruit you've never tasted before, let's say mango, and you've never tasted mango before. Well, the first time you're learning something new, first time you taste the mango, your taste buds are saying, whoa, I've never tasted this before. Guess what? After 10 days, you have brand new taste buds. The new taste buds remember the taste of mango. 3 years later, you taste the same fruit, even blindfolded, you remember, that's mango, I've tasted it before. Your taste buds have been created with the new knowledge, recreated, so to speak. So that's the concept. Everything that receives new knowledge eventually gets recreated into that new knowledge. Even within one single individual that's a human being, even within one single individual that's a human being. Why? Because every few months or so, we are a whole bunch of brand new cells that did not exist before 3 or 4 months ago. And you all know that. So we're always renewing, regenerating ourselves. So physically, we're being recreated. So apply that to the intellectual concept. You acquire new knowledge. Your physical new cells are being regenerated with the new knowledge. So they are a new creation. New creation is not just physical, as they told us in the tradition. New creation applies to the intellectual. Does it also apply to the spiritual? Of course, because every time you come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you develop more ways of recognizing the gifts and the ni'mah from Allah. Your spirit has become tighter to the blessings from Allah. You're closer to Allah. You feel more safe in the company of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of those concepts are just, you know, how can we miss those things in our tradition? Most scholars, unfortunately, who wrote books of tafsir really did not go in those directions. I know there are some exceptions, but in general, these concepts are lost in the volumes and volumes and volumes of books of tafsir that we have. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, began the creation of the divinely guidable man from teen. So teen is from dry earth and water. One more application to this word. Again, we're just on the first ayah, and look how much we have covered so far. So the word teen refers to two other things. Dry earth is sometimes referred to in Arabic as ard. Ard, al-ard al-mayta, the Quran says. Al-ard. Al-ard in the Abrahamic locution is the scripture, the text itself, the text of the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is drawing our attention that this static text that you see in front of you in a book, static, it's not moving, it's not doing anything, it's not jumping at you, becomes animated, becomes alive, becomes clean, clay, mixture of dry plus water. It becomes clayish, sort of muddy not in the sense of confusing, but muddy in the sense of flexible and moldable and plastic. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using that metaphor again, teen, to tell us that when you apply the divine guidance, the ma', the water, the divine rain, all of those concepts are very similar metaphorically. The ma' from Allah, the water, the divine rain, the divine guidance, you apply it to the physical, static scripture, the text of the Quran. It sprouts new knowledge, new understanding. So now this is a similar concept. So the creation of the divinely guidable man, remember, divinely guidable man is the one attached to the scripture, who attaches his understanding or her understanding to the scripture from Allah, provable scripture, the only one left, Al-Quran. So the beginning of any type of creation for us starts where? The Quran. This is what this ayah is saying. Clean, the combination of scripture plus divine rain, divine guidance. Can you do it without divine guidance? Don't even try it. And the proof is you have so many people who have been misguided after attempting to read the Quran while not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't believe me? Watch all of the channels who are attacking the Quran every day, hundreds of new videos probably. And they all get misled. Why? Because the Quran told us, يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Allah misguides so many with it. The Quran is used to misguide people, yes. وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. And so many are guided with it. Who does this? Allah, the divine rain. Al-Ma is provided live to those who are engaging the Quran. Those who engage the Quran with the proper attitude, with the proper approach, with the proper submission, with the proper reverence to the words of Allah, will see amazing Jannat, concealed abodes of privileged understanding. Those who approach the Quran with suspicion, with questions, with rejection, with looking for ways to defeat the Quran, guess what? They will be misguided by the Quran. And Allah does not care if you get misguided because of your own prior assumptions. Allah cares if you approach the Quran truly seeking to learn and to be guided. Allah will give you. Never Allah does turn down someone who approaches Allah with an empty cup, begging Allah, seeking knowledge, seeking guidance from Allah. The beginning of creation for a guidable man is from this combination, scripture and water, guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we understand the scope. This is the beginning. This is where insight is going to happen. So we already have a field. We already have a field of applying the next couple of ayat. And we're going to take this understanding and apply it to the paragraph from Surah 23, Surah Al-Mu'minun, which is coming next. Let's go. 32:8. ثم جعل نسله من سلالة. Here's that word that we saw before. من ماء مهين. And then he rendered his descendants, نسله. And again, you can think of descendants in terms of biological descendants, lineage, physical. Or you can talk about other types of descendants we're going to see, such as, are your students, if you're a professor, are your students part of your intellectual descendants? Well, that's one way of thinking about it. As a matter of fact, in the Western tradition today, there are many groups who use that type of metaphorical language. So, for example, Dr. Hani, you can find him in the mathematics genealogy book. What does that mean, mathematics genealogy book? That means who learned from whom. It's a metaphorical genealogy. So Dr. Hani is mentioned in the Who's Who book of mathematics and his professors. So that's a genealogy. Dr. Hani learned from this person. Dr. Hani, a professor, learned from that person, etc., etc. That's a genealogy. That's nesl. That's this word in here. So you already see that Allah is talking about insight, which is knowledge. Allah is talking about creation, which includes intellectual growth, spiritual growth. And now he's talking about descendants, nasl. He didn't talk about another term that may have been used elsewhere in the Quran to refer to descendants, such as, it'll come to me later. There's another word that the Quran uses I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that word. But in this case, nasl is used, which is really interesting. Here, nasl, yeah, it means descendants, but it means a specific type of descendants related to the khalq, which we saw includes educational, spiritual growth and development, and insight, which includes learning. ذرية is the other word. ذرية. ثم جعل ذريته. No, he did not use that word, which means lineage. No, he used naslahu. Naslahu, the descendancy or descendants. So that's a specific application of that word. Nasl and dhurriya, if you ask a typical grammarian or linguist, Arabic linguist, what's the difference? They tell you they're synonyms. No, they're not in the Quran. Here it's used differently. To be from an imperceptible extract. Why did I say imperceptible? Extract we understand because we saw sulala, like salala. Why did I say imperceptible? Because over there I said furtively. Well, what does this have to do with sulala in here? What does it have to do with a lowly fluid? A lowly fluid, ma'in mahin. You're going to see. Okay? You're going to see. ثُمَّ جَعَلَ نَسْلَهُ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ مَاءٍ مَهِينٍ. From a lowly fluid. So in the biology application of this terminology, his descendants are coming from a lowly fluid. But in the case of nasl lineage of a person who is not learning from Allah, it is possible that you get this imperceptible extract that is coming not from a divine rain, but from a lowly fluid. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting this ayah separately, is warning us, you could go in the wrong direction and you could get something that's not related to the divine water, divine rain. All right. Let's continue. ثم سواه ونفخ فيه من روحه وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. And then he proportioned him and blew into him from his divine message, and he provided for you the hearing and the eyesight and the perception. Little do you properly communicate with Allah. All of those terms are very clear. We've talked about them before. Here I just included them. And here, by the way, نفخ فيه من روحه. I want you to really pay attention. Those of you who really still are arguing against our presentation of Isa ibn Maryam, the story of Isa ibn Maryam, you want to make Isa ibn Maryam somebody really special because Allah nafakha in Maryam. Well, here it's talking about al-insan, every human being. Allah is telling us, Allah blows into him, blows into the ear as we've seen it before, of the divine message for every human being, every guidable human being. So clearly this is not unique to Isa or to Maryam. So Maryam or Isa are not special in that regard. The terminology used for their story is also used for every other human being. We've demonstrated this before. So I just want to draw your attention here to tell you again, if you've not seen the series on the story of Isa and Maryam, you owe it to yourself to go back and watch it, or to watch it from beginning if you have not seen it before. So now we understood Sulala and we extracted all of these beautiful concepts and meanings. Let's go to the paragraph from Surah 23. So the paragraph, I'm going to start with the first ayah just to position the context. The first ayah starts with قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Successful are the believers. Successful are the believers. Now, the believers are also described in ayat 2 to 9, which I'm skipping in here. That's why I'm putting this dot in here, because it gives a lot of characteristics. Okay, but basically we're talking about a bunch of believers with certain characteristics. And then Allah continues by describing them. Those are the inheritors. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ الْوَارِثُونَ. So I hope it's really clear. It's not just basic believers. Believers with additional characteristics described from ayat 2 to 9 in this surah. I'm skipping over it because I want to keep the time to a minimum on this segment. We're already over an hour of me speaking, and I still need to come and take your questions. So I apologize, but we're going to go for probably another half an hour, and then we'll take questions toward the end. So ayah 10, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْوَارِثُونَ. Those are the inheritors. Who are those? The believers with all the characteristics that are described in ayah 2 to 9 of this surah. They're inheritors. الَّذِينَ يَرِثُونَ الْفِرْدَوْسَ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Who inherit from those in Firdaus, i.e. the state of being safe from stomping in the hijr, in the afterlife. It's a mouthful. I'm sure if you have not been with us on the MQ Live, which is available on Zoom every first and third Sunday of the month to subscribers on the website. If you have not been with us on the MQ Live Zoom sessions, you don't understand what I just said. That's why I've been encouraging everyone, please subscribe to the website so you have access to a lot more knowledge, a lot more information that I cannot just put out easily on YouTube format. But still, this is part of our translation. In a translation that we will be publishing in sections, inshallah, we'll explain a lot more. So in the afterlife model of the Quran, there's the concept of hijr. And in the concept of hijr, there's the concept of stomping. I'm not going to go through the details. I'm just using these terms to let you know there's a lot of foundational knowledge behind these words. So being safe from the stomping, from the daus, is firdaus, to escape the stomping. This is a state, a certain station for those afterlife. Those in the afterlife who are in al-firdaus, when they are dead, because they're already in the afterlife, as we said, they leave behind certain knowledge. I want you to start thinking. So we're already talking about knowledge, and we're going to see the rest of the paragraph, as in the prior one from Surah 32, talk about knowledge and ihsan, insight. We're going to see it. So those who inherit from those in Firdaus, of course, they don't inherit the Firdaus, because Firdaus, once you enter it, you never leave it. You don't let anyone inherit it after you, because there's no death in the afterlife. So once you enter Al-Firdaus, you're already dead, so to speak, in life, and the ilm you left is what others inherit from you. So those who are inheriting from those in Firdaus, i.e. the state of being safe from the stomping in the hijr in the afterlife, they are in its way while in a daze. Hum fiha khalidun. Why did I say its way? Its way. Fiha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this type of expression in many different places. For example, the last ayah in Surah 29, Al-Ankabut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا, فِينَا, like fiha in here, fi, the same pronoun, article, preposition, fi, followed by na pronoun over there in Surah 29. Here, fiha, this pronoun, her or it means in the way of, in the way of. So in this case, in its way, meaning in the way of Al-Firdaus. They are in the way of Al-Firdaus while they are in a daze. Again, the concept of daze, we've talked about it before. Concept of daze refers to this period of time right before you totally go asleep. So between sleep and awake, those few seconds and few moments sometimes, where you're still not fully conscious, but not fully absent-minded. And there's a download, there's the dramatic exchange of knowledge, the tawaffi, basically. We're going to see this later, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers all of your pending questions that you deserve or you are ready to receive knowledge about. So again, the days is already talking about knowledge. So this paragraph is already setting the stage. Warithun, they inherit the Firdaus, which is the state of those in Firdaus, or the knowledge left by those who are already in Firdaus. And in its way, in the way of the Firdaus, they're receiving in a daze. So we're already there. We're already understanding this is talking about knowledge. Why am I stressing this? Because if you go back to the traditional interpretations, especially the modern ones, and the translations, they're saying this is talking about genealogy. And you're going to see, unfortunately, that's a stretch. You're going to see this. Continuing, ayah 12. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. Anytime we see وَلَقَدْ, and we've talked about this before, وَلَقَدْ, that means Allah is jumping earlier in the story, telling you something that He did not tell you before. Why would He do this? Because He wants you to practice understanding the habits of the Quran. This is not for elementary students. This is not for those people who want to read it just before they go to sleep for entertainment purposes. The Quran is a text for those who want to toil, to work, to be serious about acquiring insight, as we saw. الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه. He has placed insight in everything He has created. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is expecting you to seek seriously while applying and exerting effort, intellectual effort. وَلَقَدْ, before, خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. Very similar to the ayah that we saw in Surah 32. We have created, in this case, I'm adding vivified. Why? Because adding new life, adding new knowledge is like adding new life. The divinely guidable man from an imperceptible extract, the same concept, furtive type of extraction, from teen, the same thing, again, from a mixture of ard, the static scriptural units or scripture, and ma, which is the divine guidance. Same concept as we saw before in Surah 32. Now, we're adding a new thing here. Allah is fleshing out more details. Listen to the word, fleshing out more details. You're going to see fleshing out in this paragraph. It's truly amazing. It's truly amazing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the terms and is sort of putting on display the example of what He's talking about. And you're going to see it for yourself. ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين. So remember, al-insan is an extract, a furtive extract, secretive extract, sort of not really paying attention. If you're not paying attention, you miss it kind of thing. That starts from teen, which is a mixture of ard and ma. And then we made it, or rendered it, this imperceptible extract, to become a zygote, nutfa. We've talked about nutfa. And by the way, this is one essential proof that the birth of Isa was not miraculous, because this concept of nutfa, which is the sort of the joining of a sperm and an ovum, a feminine ovum, and a masculine sperm, the joining of them becomes a nutfa, a zygote. That concept is repeated 11 times in the Quran. And it says every human being goes through that process, including Isa. Well, yeah, unless you want to label him as divinely, a divine being or a semi-divine being. If you want to do that, then you cannot apply those 11 ayat. But if you think of Isa as a human being, which Muslims are required to, then Isa was created using the normal process. And this is what we demonstrated in the series about Isa. Again, please refer to that if you have not watched it yet. ثم جعلناه نطفة, a zygote. So that's a union. Pay attention, because now we're coming back to the feminine and masculine. So Allah is introducing the concept of a joining between the feminine and the masculine. So where did the masculine come from? Well, it comes from dhikr. How do we know this? Because Muhammad is commanded dhakkir, and we are reminded and instructed dhakkir bil Quran. Dhakkir, like dhakar, do the masculine thing. Well, what is that? So when you read the Quran and engage the Quran and you come up with questions, you're inserting seeds. Seeds into where? Seeds into your mind. Some of those questions you may know the answers to. Some of them you don't. They remain masculine parts, waiting to germinate. Well, how do they germinate? This process is telling you they have to match up with a ovum. Where did the ovum come? From the creation in here, from this extraction. Where did this extraction come? From teen. So now we see the process. We're going to see it visually in just a few minutes. The process is you start with this mixture of teen, ard plus divine rain. It allowed you to understand something new in the Quran. So now you have something that is a new understanding, but is at the same time, an ovum. It's ready to receive what? Further questions. When you ask further questions, masculine, dhakkir, reading, engaging the Quran, that's a masculine. It connects to it. And with time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may provide additional rain and more growth happen. More growth happen, that means you have more ovums, feminine. And with that, you do more toiling. And with the new toiling, what happens? You produce more seeds, and the seeds go into these new well springs, if you want, the ovums. And the whole process continues again and again. I hope you see the process. We're going to see it detailed, laid out. But this is the beginning. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, in a stunning way, using the masculine and feminine, that, to be honest with you, I haven't seen anyone talk about it this way. Yeah, in the Chinese yin and yang, a little bit, but the Quran is so precise in using, and you're going to see it graphically, and you're going to understand exactly where I'm going with this and why I'm so excited about this. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. We have created this divinely guidable man from an imperceptible extract. Why is it imperceptible? Because that ovum, that sort of receptacle that is ready for your further probing and questioning, excuse my language, probing, is laying dormant until you probe it. It's sitting there doing nothing. Does it remind us of the, biological process we're all familiar with? Absolutely. Is Allah using that type of metaphorical, reminiscent model to help us understand what happens in our own learning? Absolutely. If that process, if that model, the biological model, is used for physical creation, guess what? It's also valid for the intellectual, spiritual creation. That's why I keep telling you, khalaqa is not just about the biology. It also goes for the intellectual and the spiritual applications. Truly, truly amazing, truly beautiful and multidimensional. And shame on us if we don't understand more and more because of these gushing well springs. So we continue. ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين. So we have rendered this sulala, this extract, to become a zygote. So remember that the sulala is a feminine. The word itself is feminine. So Allah is using feminine, and it becomes a zygote after it's paired with the masculine. We're going to see how the pairing happens. So, and then it is placed fi qararin makin, established in high station in a excuse me, in a concealed permanence. Sorry, I need to drink. So what is that? What is that? What is the high station? What is qarar? Again, those of you who are with us on the MQ Live Zoom sessions, you understand the concept of qarar. Qarar is a reference to the nafs. So now this is another clear indication that we're not talking just about the physical. We're talking about the growth of the nafs, the educational growth, the intellectual growth. So therefore, that's why, partly why this is a separated ayah. It's an ayah that's separated from the next ayah, which you will see gives us a lot of reminiscent language for the biology. I know I'm mixing the two, but as I told you, the biological language model cannot be restricted to the biology, cannot be restricted to genealogy or embryology, as they have done in the last 50 years or so. Those who want to claim scientific miracles in the Quran and all of this stuff, wonderful. So where were these miracles for the last 1400 years before you guys discovered them? How come you didn't know about them? Well, it's just clinging on to whatever they can make things up. But the Quran is talking about something else, which is applicable and knowable for the last 1400 years. And yet our scholars really did not pay attention to it as much as they should have. So we'll continue. So far we have a zygote. We have a zygote, which is a pairing of female and masculine, the feminine and the masculine. Okay. So ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة, and then later, pay attention. ثم, that means later. It's not immediate. We created the zygote as a alaqa, an attached cluster of things attached. Now again, in the realm of the nafs, that means something very specific that's related to the qarar. And again, those of you who are on the MQ Live Zoom sessions understand what I'm saying. And then فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً, and then we created the firmly attached cluster, this attached cluster in here, into a mudgha. The word mudgha in Arabic means something you chew. I want you to pay attention. The word mudgha is something you chew. So what does this have to do with the biological process of the ovum and the, and the alaqa and the zygote and all of this stuff? Well, it's pointing us into the realm of the metaphorical. So is it being chewed in the womb? Possibly, but that's not the word madagha. Madagha is literally to chew and to be ready to digest or to swallow. So Allah is pointing us in the realm of the meaning of the word akil. We're going to see it. We're going to see it, how it's going to move in a different direction now. So mudgha is related to something you chew. In the Abrahamic locution, we know that the word akil, which means food, is referring to the divine speech or the special Abrahamic locution type of speech. So now we're starting to see the play on the different metaphorical applications. So this alaqa is becoming a mudgha, which literally means morsel. And then continues, فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا, and then we created the morsel into عِظَام. Pay attention, this is a short alif, which literally means bones. In this case, a solid bone-like frame, because عِظَام is multiple. And عِظَام are either a pile or connected to form a structure. In this case, clearly connected, plural. It's not just one. Notice that the mudgha, the single morsel, became multiple bones, plural. which by definition must tell us that it's a structure. It's not just one. Different bones for different parts in that structure. And then we fleshed out with lahm. We fleshed out with lahm. ثم فكسونا العظام لحما. We fleshed out with lahm, which means muscle and fat. I want you to know that in Arabic, the word lahm doesn't mean just the flesh. It means muscle plus fat plus all the connective tissue is lahm. That's contrasted with other words that are exclusive to fat. So we fleshed out with muscle and fat the solid bone-like frame. كسونا العظام لحما. ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر. And then we evolved it, أنشأناه, evolved it or grew it or developed it into a different type of creation, other creations, different types. Let me raise this a little bit so you can see it better. So far, we have multiple steps that we went through. So initially, let me go here. Initially, it starts from this extract. The extract comes from teen, and then this extract becomes a nutfa, zygote, and then the nutfa becomes alaqa, and then the alaqa becomes mudgha, and then the mudgha becomes idam, and then idam are fleshed with lahm. Pay attention, Allah changed the verb in here. Not khalaqna al-idama lahman. We fleshed them. We fleshed them. So if this is referring to embryology and biology, why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, we created around the bones, the flesh, just like He did create in here. Because Allah is forcing us to consider this is not just talking about biology. Yes, it's applicable to the biology, but it's not just talking about the biology. And then we evolved it into other type of creation. And the last ayah is absolutely stunning because we've seen it before. We have a segment on the channel that talks about the barakah that Musa sought, and that was given by Allah and then granted by Allah to certain selected individuals who became Nabiyun. We've talked about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being one of those burika, and we've talked about that segment. Go back to look for what is barakah and why did Musa seek it. This is referring to barakah, which is the blessing. We said roughly that's translated as blessing. I don't like that translation. We're still looking for a better word, but for now this is good enough. Barakah, blessing. So the verb tabaraka is of the form tafa'ala, which means there's some interactive aspect of the verb. Pay attention. So it's not Allah baraka. It's not Allah baraka. Allah is tabaraka. That means there's some interaction in the process of endowing this whole set of steps with the blessing of Allah. Let me repeat it. I need you to understand this. There is some sort of interactive aspect of the verb tabaraka. Allah is interactively endowing His blessing upon this whole process. What does that mean? If this whole process is talking about embryology, and embryology is, as they told us, on autopilot, then this verb would not be including the concept of interactivity. I hope you understand what I just said. Let me repeat it. The modern people who claim this is related to embryology, and I know they're good intentioned people, and goodwill people, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, they don't ask these tough questions. It's our job to ask these tough questions and to be honest about engaging the Quran. If the word tabaraka means what it means, which means there's an element of interactivity, and you're saying this whole paragraph is about embryology, Well, the whole process or set of processes for embryology is on autopilot. So where's the tabaraka in here? Where's the interactivity? Well, it only works if there is some free will involved from the recipient of all of this. So if it is about knowledge, if it's about other things that we're going to see, planning, then there is blessing conferred by Allah to the degree that you are following the process properly. That's tabaraka. There's interactivity between Allah, al-ilah, Allah, the one Allah, one God, one divine source of all knowledge, and the person who volitionally is following the process as Allah is teaching us in here. We're going to see it again graphically. فَتَبَارَكَ Allah. Allah, the exclusive provider of insight of all creators. This is another signal. Why is he saying al-khaliqin? There are multiple creators, but he is the one who is the exclusive source of insight. So other people may create an airplane, but there's no insight in the airplane. You can't, it's engineering. Once you learn it, that's it. There's no more insight. The person who created it has a ceiling of knowledge. That's it. But everything created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides insight, and he is the exclusive creator. And everybody knows that. No one has ever created an ant from scratch. No one has created anything unless it is imitating nature in some form, nature created by Allah. So Allah is the ultimate or the exclusive insight provider of all those who proclaim to be creators, or others proclaim to be creators. Now, tabaraka, there is reciprocity, interactivity. Allah reciprocates to the seekers of knowledge with incremental blessings. This is the proper translation of this last sentence. I hope you understand. In the interest of time and completion, let's continue. And again, I know the time is running, and I know you have a lot of questions. So we'll keep going. ثم إنكم بعد ذلك لميتون. Pay attention. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala separate this ayah from the prior 3 ayat? Which reminds me, I have another question in here. If these 3 ayat are about embryology, could someone tell me why are they broken up into this type of 3 ayat? Let me repeat the question again. If as they told us in the last 50 years, with goodwill, with beautiful heart, and I know all of these things. If they told us this is applicable to embryology, okay, great. Well, we didn't know this before the last 50 years. So that proves, by the way, that we can learn new things beyond what the traditional interpretation means. Okay. Well, so don't attack Dr. Hani when he brings you new understanding, because you're doing the same thing. This is, you claim about embryology, which they did not know 60, 70 years ago or before that. All right, put that aside. Let's say it's about embryology. Why are all these ayat, all of these steps broken into 3 separate ayat the way they are? Why aren't they like this one, a whole bunch of steps put together in one ayat? Because they're one process. Why? Can someone explain that to me if this is exclusively about embryology? Of course it's not. It's about something else, and we're going to see it. So this explains it. ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ لَمَيِّتُونَ. This step in here, eventually you're going to be physically dying. What does that mean? That means that everything we've talked about in here is applicable to the living, physically living. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about something that happens in this life. So يَرِثُونَ الْفِرْدَوْسِ, in this life, this is exactly what we said at the very beginning. They inherit those who passed away and went into Firdaus, but the ones inheriting are in this life. So this is the proof. إِنَّكُمْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ لَمَيِّتُونَ. Hey, Dr. Hani, didn't they teach us that Firdaus, you end up in Firdaus afterlife? Well, go ask them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, you end up in the state of inheriting from those in Firdaus. while in this life. Let me repeat it. You end up in a state of inheriting from those who are in Firdaus while you are in this life. That means we're talking about ilm. We're talking about spiritual development. This is the proof. So, إنكم بعد ذلك لميتون is there, this ayah, to highlight that the whole paragraph is talking about people physically alive, because eventually you're going to die. You're going to be physically dying. ثم إنكم يوم القيامة تبعثون. And then possibly before you die, that's why it's separated as a separate ayah. Again, because if it was inevitable that Mayyitun is followed by Yawm al-Qiyamah, meaning your death is followed by Yawm al-Qiyamah, if it was inevitably in that sequence, Allah would have put them in the same ayah. But He separated them. Why? Because this ayah may happen before it. Thumma simply means a time passes. That's it. A time passes, and then on the day of restoration, this is not the day of judgment, as they taught us in the tradition. You are revivified. You are, brought back, missioned again. Missioned again. We're going to see it in the graphic. Missioned again. Now, this is the amazing part. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعَ طَرَائِقَ وَمَا كُنَّا عَنِ الْخَلْقِ غَافِلِينَ. Remember, وَلَقَدْ refers to something earlier. وَلَقَدْ, and before all of that, what all of that? All of those steps that we just went through. Before all of that, we had created over you, dominating over you, 7 means. طرائق, plural of tariqa, the means, the way to do something, the approach, the process, the steps, so to speak. 7 means for your knowledge acquisition. Why? I just proved that it's not about embryology per se. It's about knowledge, something much bigger than that. And by the way, embryology cannot happen without knowledge, which they have proven. There's no embryology without the DNA, which is a database of information. So it's knowledge. It's all about knowledge, information. Even embryology, embryology is one of its applications. So it's knowledge acquisition and other things, as we're going to see. And never of the creation steps have we been unaware. What does that mean? It means Allah has always been directly engaged in the steps of creation. Creation in the biological sense, every type of creation, including intellectual. Do you remember in the series on Dhul Qarnayn, we talked about al-asbab, the causative, the causation, the concept of causation. And we talked about 3 different major philosophies that exist in history regarding the concept of causation. So most people believe that causation drives the universe. If you drop something from a 10th story building, it's going to drop because the cause is gravity. Well, Al-Ghazali, and then later on David Hume in UK, before it was UK, Great Britain it was at that time. Al-Ghazali and David Hume in England came up with the concept that causation itself is really not valid. So if the sun rises every morning from the east, there's no proof whatsoever that it will rise again from the east tomorrow. And by the way, the Quran talks about this. Al-Ghazali had a different argument for it. David Hume copied that argument. This is for the record, copied that argument and became very famous for that. But then we had in the 20th century, a major Turkish scholar, his name is Said al-Nawrasi. Said al-Nawrasi. He's referred to as Badi' al-Zaman, the marvelous sort of product of Zaman, of the time. Badi' al-Nawrasi came up with the concept that not only there is no causation per se, that there are miracles. Miracles happen, as Ghazali and David Hume said. Badi' al-Zaman, Said al-Nawrasi said, everything that happens is a miracle. Everything that happens is a miracle. Every action, every interaction on a chemical level, on a physical level, every electron moving from point A to point B or from state A to state B, any action, any change that happens anywhere at any level in the universe, physical universe, is directly caused and sustained by Allah. That's what Saeed al-Nursi said. He died in the 1960s. May Allah have mercy on his soul. So this ayah is taking us in that direction. وَمَا كُنَّا عَنِ الْخَلْقِ غَافِلِينَ. Nothing happens in creation that we are unaware of. Beautiful confirmation of that concept, which we covered 3 years ago in the first segment, if I remember, of the series on Dhul Qarnayn. This ayah is saying we have created above you 7 means. 7 means, we're going to see what they are. Because these ayats spell them out. And we're going to see them in a graphical format. Now, let me stop here because the next 3-4 ayat, I'm going to put the translation for you. You need to read them, but because of the time, I'm going to skip over them. But I want to jump into the summary so I can show you the divinely guided, the graphic representation of everything we've covered so far. Let me take this part out to make more room on the screen. I hope you can see. So this is the summary of everything we've covered so far. This is the original, literal, step-by-step of everything we've covered in Surah 23, Al-Mu'minun. So there is an origination, which is a selection mixture, at-tin, min tin, and then the verb khalaqna, sulala. Sulala is an extract. And we said that becomes the recipient, the ovum, and then it becomes nutfa. Nutfa requires dhikr, dhakkir, contribute the masculine element, dhakkir, dhakar, dhikr. All of those terms are from the same root. Now it makes sense. So every time we do dhikr, in the sense of studying the dhikr is contributing masculine elements. Okay, so sulala is by definition feminine because the result is nutfa. Nutfa is a combination of the feminine and the masculine. I hope you're seeing the beauty of this metaphor. This metaphor, by the way, applies to hundreds of ayat. Hundreds of ayat. It applies on so many different levels. I'm just giving you a huge disclosure in here that is a major gushing wellspring of new ways of understanding the Quran and stories of the Quran. Hint, hint. All right. Nutfa, zygote. And then after that, khalaqna alaqa, an attached cluster, as we said. And then khalaqna mudgha, morsel. Morsel clearly is a mouthful, a bite, that you bite, that you chew. Well, what does this have to do with the biology of down there? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing to us that this is about the knowledge, the information, the expressions, the understanding that you extract from speech, as we defined akala and akl to refer to those expressions. All right. And then it becomes, and then we create idam, a solid bone-like frame. Where do they come from? From this mudgha, from this morsel. And then kasawna, different verb in here. So notice, khalaqna, to create, ja'alna, to render, khalaqna, to create, khalaqna, to create, khalaqna, to create, and then kasawna, we fleshed. We fleshed. It's not just creation. It's more than that. So what did we kasawna? Lahman, well, the word lahm, we've seen this before in the segment that talks about the man who died 100 years under the series of Surah 80, Surah Abasa. Lahm means muscle and fat, as we said. This is a basic understanding. But the word lahm also means followers or adherents. Followers of an idea, followers of understanding, followers or adherents to a certain realization, knowledge, information. It makes perfect sense. Why is this relevant? Because the word lahm is used in other places in the Quran. This understanding is very relevant. So now we're setting the stage to understand the Quran in real advanced ways that were not accessible to us before. And then, by the way, the seventh step, ansha'na, evolved them into what? A different creation back to the selection mixture, the same selection mixture from which khalaqna. And that whole process where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reciprocating with additional barakah is called tabarakallah. Tabarakallah is this whole interactive 7-step process that is described in Surah 23. Now, we go from this original to the first application, which is the guided learning, divinely guided learning. So we're going to change a little bit the terminology, all within the logical, reasonable boundaries of hudud, of semantics. And you'll see now we have a new learning model that Allah is sharing with us. So we start from the teen, the same thing, existing state of knowledge. It's a mixture of understanding the scripture based on some divine guidance that Allah provided, even to the non-believers. Teen. They received either from the scripture or from other sources. The point is, there's some static understanding with which Allah provides additional irrigation, water, and with that, we understand more. So this is the existing state of knowledge. Now we follow the 7-step process. We create, Allah helps us to create sulala. Yes, I said helps us. Tabaraka. He interactively blesses us to receive and to co-create. Yes, tabaraka. It's interactive, reciprocation. So He and Allah and us, we co-create sulala. We extract an idea from the existing knowledge, and then it becomes a nutfa, the feminine aspect. What do we have to do? We have to add, we have to toil, we have to work, provide additional possible injections, new seeds of possibilities. A seed is just a possibility. So then it becomes a plausible hypothesis. That's exactly what we do. And then we take this plausible hypothesis, and then it becomes a cluster of concepts with more development of this knowledge. And then it becomes manageable understanding. Now we realize, yeah, it's manageable, it's doable. We understand what's going on. We have a practical application for it, manageable. And then we have a new mental schema, idam, the structure, the frame. Remember how we defined the schema, the mental schema. Go back to the segments where we talked about umniyatihi, and we said this is not an Arabic word. Umniyatihi, the mother of his intention, which is the schema that generates. This is the schema. It's related to idam. So the idam, the bone-like structure that we saw earlier, and then they are fleshed. The schema, which is in one person's mind. Imagine Newton. Now he understands gravity. In his mind, he has manageable understanding. After he proved it, etc., etc., it became a new schema that is shared with adherents. Kasauna, fleshed that one idea with many adherents. Remember adherents. We saw it in the story about the man who died 100 years. So, and then we continue from adherents, and we evolve them into a new existing state of knowledge, from which new ideas come, from new extracts are pulled out, and new creations start to happen again. And this is the cycle. Of continuous tabaraka, collaboration, if you want, or sort of reciprocation from Allah toward new knowledge that we receive as human beings. 7 steps. Those are the 7 steps that Allah laid out in detail, in full accuracy in front of us. So you want to apply embryology to it? You can. I see something much more beautiful. I see something much bigger, much more applicable to everything we do. You teach your own kids how to think in terms of this. You teach your own employees how to follow this process. So you don't start from scratch. You start from an existing state of knowledge, which is what we do. In our case, we start from the scripture plus divine guidance from Allah. And we have been building step by step every time we go through this cycle. And as we go through this cycle, we have a new creation. أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. We go and become a new creation with every iteration in this cycle. That's one application. Another application is the planning process. Watch this. This is really, truly stunning. So you take an existing state of affairs. Think of an existing corporation, an existing government organization, an existing family who wants to do some sort of planning. And what is the process that we go through? Again, this same 7-step process is applicable to the planning. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because we really want to take some questions before we close. But the same concept applies if we want to take it in that direction. Look, if you took it in the direction of applying it to embryology, I have every right to take it in as many directions as I find applicable. All right? So you want to criticize, be my guest. You want to open your mind and allow your cup to be filled with all sorts of new, beautiful applications of the Quran. Here it is. So we start from the existing state of affairs, some sort of existing organized way or disorganized way, whatever you want. And then you develop some aspiration, sulala, you extract from it something that pops in your head, aha moment, like, I wish we could do this. Okay, well, we have a vision. We have a vision for how we can solve this problem or achieve this aspiration. Then we develop specific goals, final goals. So this solution, let's say I have a landfill, garbage dump, and it's ugly and it's smelly and that kind of thing. Well, there's an aspiration that we can turn it into a sport stadium. Okay, well, here's the vision. What are the steps? Well, before we get into the steps, let's develop, after the vision, what it looks like when it's finished. What are the clear goals? Well, the stadium has to be this big. The smell has to be totally, disappeared. It has to be structurally stable. We can make profits from it. All of those goals, right? And then we develop intermediate goals. Mudgha, something we can chew on. So step by step by step, bites at a time, chewable morsels that I can handle. Over there in the knowledge model, we said manageable understanding. We can luqma. We said luqma, right? Luqma, mudgha. Here, intermediate goals. So steps that we can achieve within reasonable amount of time, within the resources that we have. I can't build the whole stadium in one day. Well, I build the foundation, and that's the first goal. And then I build the outside structure, the second goal, and then the flooring, and then, etc. All of those steps that engineers can lay out to achieve intermediate goals. Mudgha, something I can bite into and handle and digest and complete before moving on to the next step. And then we have all the steps in one plan. Now we have all of this. It's just a plan right now. It's just a plan. Now the plan is transformed into a team. We have to develop a team. So around this plan, now I can decide how big is the team. Is it a stadium that requires 10,000 people to build because we need to build it in 3 months? Or is it a stadium that requires, 500 people because we have 7 years to build it? Which one? Depending on the plan, depending on the size of the morsels, I can lay out the number of members of that team or group or the actual people who will get to do it. When they get it done, they have just created, they have evolved, developed a new state of affairs. What do we do from there? Well, we start again. Now we have a new state of affairs and we go through this again and we go through it, and so on and so forth. So the 7 steps, the tara'iq, the means, those are explicitly spelled out in Surah 23. Where did they come from? Allah is telling us He created them. He provided those steps that we go through. And if we submit, that means we understand these steps and live within those steps. We understand those steps. So you go to any planner, you go to any kind of philosophy of epistemology kind of guy, and they tell you these are the steps you go through. So the Quran is telling us since 1400 years how to organize ourselves, how to organize our knowledge acquisition, how to go about the process of co-creating. Did we create a stadium by the time we're done with this? Yes, we created a new stadium. By ourselves? No, with the help of Allah. Tabarakallah. Tabarakallah. Allah reciprocated with blessing, with putting success in our work. When we acquired understanding of gravity, did Newton do it by himself? No. Tabarakallah. Allah provided reciprocation to his effort of seeking knowledge. And the process he went through is the 7-step process that I just described in here. So to go back to the very beginning, the title of the whole presentation, the masculine and the feminine, where does that come in? It came in right at the very beginning, but in reality, if you really think about it, every step of the way, there is a feminine that is empowered or enabled by Allah, feminine part, and we have to put our own part. That's tabarakallah. This reciprocity between something from Allah, enabled by the process and the design and the creation from Allah, and our own effort, bringing the masculine part. Bringing the masculine part. So the mind by itself, according to this metaphor, is only masculine. Without the contribution of the feminine creation part from Allah, the masculine by itself does not get us to success, does not get us to the new evolving, the new a new type of creation. Human beings are able to create new things because Allah is co-creating or allowing us to co-create through processes like this. And it starts with understanding the feminine and the masculine. This is just the beginning. This is literally just scratching the tip of the iceberg, literally the surface. I'm mixing metaphors there. Scratching the surface. Because the metaphor of the feminine and the masculine are going to take us in so many directions. And you're going to see, inshallah, in future segments, we're going to start exploring stories that allow us to understand the masculine and the feminine using these concepts. And once we understand these stories using these concepts, all bets are off. It is a novel way to look at the Quran using metaphorical, flowery language that we're all familiar with. All right, we have about 10 minutes left to the 2-hour mark. And I apologize, I've been talking a lot, but I hope this has been useful. I really didn't want to break it up. I wanted a cohesive collection of information put in front of you, so you can refer to it and hopefully you can watch it again. And of course, we're going to develop it in many, many different ways. So now I'm going to take a few of your questions, and hopefully we can learn together from your question. I'm going to go back to the beginning a little bit and see where you guys have put those question marks. Again, one more time, please don't forget to put the likes and to go down below after the session is over and put some comments, positive comments, hopefully. And then if you have some questions, we can follow up on the comment stream. All right, here's a question. I have a general question to discuss. My question is, what would be the solution for individuals like us who don't understand Arabic? I keep answering this question again and again. I'm sure based on your name, well, I shouldn't be saying that, but I assume based on your name that you've learned English at one point in time, or you've learned a second language at one point in time because of necessity. Well, what's more necessary than to seek this process that we just described, the ability to develop knowledge and the ability to plan for events in our life? What is more important? Isn't this something that we would have access to if we have access to the Arabic of the Quran? So it's worth the investment. So, and Arabic is an easy language. I assure you, within 6 months to a year, you will be proficient enough to know, probably without exaggeration, 40 to 60% of the Quran. With the help of the locution that we keep disclosing on this channel, you will probably get to about maybe 60, 70% of the terminology of the Quran. So we're doing our part to help you, but you also can develop more knowledge of Arabic, inshallah. Let's see. I feel like a major aspect that the Quran is trying to teach us humans is to let go of our toxic pride and ego. I feel like this concept of letting these two go can be found all through the Quran. Absolutely. This is brother SA or sister SA. Another comment from AI. Verse 3:14, 48, 29 tells us that Muhammad is Rasul. Is there a verse defining Quran as Rasul? We've talked about this so many times in the prior probably 10, 20 videos. I don't want to go through it right now, but please refer back to some of those earlier videos. We've talked about them. Anytime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells us, obey the messenger, and Muhammad is not with us to listen to what he's saying, and of course we don't have videotapes and recordings and CDs and YouTube segments of Muhammad specifically giving us instructions. In the absence of all of those things, how am I, Hani, today in the 21st century supposed to obey Muhammad? Well, Allah is not talking about the person of Muhammad the Rasul. Allah is talking about the output, the work product, so to speak, the thing he brought us as a Rasul, which is the Quran. Therefore, obey the Rasul by definition means obey the Quran. The Quran is our Rasul. So I talked a little bit about the difference between Nasl, ذرية, أهل, أهلين, قوم, قرية. We've talked about them in many different places. Perhaps we can have a post about these things, and I can contribute, and other members on the website www.marvelousquran.org can contribute to those, to clarifying those terms. From brother, let's see, Saiful Islam, Bangladesh, requesting you with due honor to expound 230. Again, please put it as a post, and we'll see if we can engage this kind of request on the post. But for today, we have very limited time left. I want to take as many questions related to this topic that we covered today. In 7720, who is Allah referred to being created as Mahin? Are these the beliers? Yes, they are. They are the people who are not receiving the divine rain, the ma from Allah. So you want to make it up, you want to do your own thing, you want to sort of violate the principles that Allah provided us in the Quran. You're following another type of mahin. That's one way to understand it in the confines of applying these ayat to the knowledge model, to the knowledge extraction, knowledge development model. Let's see. MashaAllah, there are lots of questions from Sister AI. What is khalqun jadid in some ayat? How is it different from insha'a khalaqa? I just covered it. I hope that the question has been answered already. 2314 looks like describing stages of formation of an insightful creation. Absolutely, because it starts with, as we saw in Surah 32, أحسن كل شيء خلقه. So every process, every step of creation, there is more insight being added. And that's the greatness of what we just saw, that Allah is not just sharing information with us. You know, like a fish. Fish, you know, you show the fish that you can eat from the top right corner of the aquarium. The fish can learn that knowledge, but there's no insight in that. And as a matter of fact, the fish may forget that very quickly. But when we learn something new with insight, we become a new creation. And that new creation is endowed with more insight. Over time, this is cumulative. And this is the explanation of the evolution that we human beings have seen. I don't mean biological evolution like you know, the origin of species and all of that stuff. No, I'm talking about the type of evolution that we saw today. The type of evolution where people are literally becoming a new creation over time. We talked about this in the last YouTube live, where we talked about the significant threat that's facing us as Muslims. So please refer to that, and you will understand a little bit more about this type of evolution and threat. All right, Sister Niza, the diagram of original literal, is that for the growth of an insan or production of many different nutfa? Both. It could go, you know, multiple layers of that application of that diagram, or multiple insan. But basically the process is the same. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the schema, sort of a template of that repeating 7-step process. And now you can apply it. And I just shared with you the application in the domain of knowledge acquisition. And I shared with you the application in the domain of planning. And others in the last 50, 60 years have shared with you an application in the domain of embryology. And there might be hundreds of other applications. But that 7-step process, the 7 tara'iq, the 7 means, ways of progressing through that cycle, is applicable to all sorts of things. Because every time we have a new creation, any type of new creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, you go through these 7 steps. I hope this is impressing you, because this is not, I mean, it's not easy for a human being to take disparate, you know, separate type of observations and bring them into a concise, simple, easy to understand model, as we have seen in these few ayat from Surah Al-Mu'minun. Let's see. I'm looking for more questions, Brother Shahzad. Beautiful. The diagrams make it easy to follow and understand. Alhamdulillah. Again, Sister AI, can we say sulala is a concatenated word like salsabil? You know, I mentioned that salala is used in 3 places. And I also mentioned that some grammarians have said that it's possibly used in other locations in the Quran, such as salasil, salasil wa aghlala. You know, salasil, the word salasil may, I'm not convinced, but some people have claimed that it may be related to the same root, salala. I'm really not convinced, but some people have made that claim. So salasil refer to chains in our interpretation based on the Abrahamic locution. But some scholars have made that claim. Salsabila, no, that's not related to that. We've already seen the etymology of that word. Salsabilan, ask as a way to achieve knowledge. By the way, salsabilan, ask as a way to achieve knowledge. Where's the question in this process that we saw? Where's the question? Sal, ask as a way to achieve knowledge. Well, ask is your masculine contribution. Well, I'm a woman. No. I'm not talking about woman and man. I'm talking about here, metaphorically, masculine. You're contributing by creating questions. My questions contribute to the process. Yes, that's the masculine contribution. It plugs into what Allah has already deposited from the malaika. Remember, we talked about the Weltanschauung? They're depositing a receptacle in your mind. They're ready for you. You may ask the right question, they plug in, and then you have a nutfa that grows, etc., as we have seen the process. So where do you contribute? Ask questions, do the toiling on the words of Allah. search for new knowledge, work through this whole process. Allah will cooperate, co-create with you to give you a new type of creation at the end, from which you start a new sulala, etc., etc. And the whole process continues. How long? How long? Not just as long as you live. As long as your nafs exists. Again, based on the discussions that we've had in the MQ Live Zoom sessions, most of you should understand what I just said. All right, we're going to take a few more questions. Let's see. A or B, what about the al-abrar of other cultures who don't know anything about the Quran? This process is not limited to the divinely guidable man, by the way. So this process, you notice, everybody is divinely guidable if they follow this process. So where do they learn from? Well, knowledge is pervasive. Remember, we started from teen. Well, what is teen? Teen is a combination of something static, some piece of information, plus a divine guidance of some sort. Is this available to non-believers? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Of course it is. For reasons that Allah knows. Tabarakallah. He is the one who decides and reciprocates, not just based on how well connected to Allah you are. Of course, that's better. That's sort of submitting to that process. If we don't follow this process, shame on us, because we are seeking to connect with Allah. But is that exclusive to us? No, it's not. It's available to non-believers too. Allah chooses when and how He wants to reveal new aspects of His creation, new knowledge about His creation. Let's see. From Sister Sophia, returning to mission, raja'a, missioned again, ba'atha, refer to the same thing? Yes, it is. What is the difference? Ba'atha is sort of with a renewed sense of knowledge, with a renewed sense of understanding. Ba'atha. Whereas raja'a is just to return. He forgot about it for a while and returned to it, as the prisoner in the case of the story of Yusuf. He forgot about it for a while and returned. The knowledge that he got, which is the interpretation of the report from the king, was not applicable to him. He's just returning to that original mission which Yusuf has tasked him with. But the knowledge he gave him, which is his mission to deliver something to the king, that knowledge was actually not known by the prisoner, not understood by the prisoner. So remember, we explained in the story of Yusuf that when Yusuf explained the report of the king, he had codified his answer, Yusuf's answer, so that only the king would understand. So the prisoner did not benefit from this new knowledge. But raja'a la'alli arji'u ila an-nas. Perhaps I return to my mission without new knowledge. So raja'a without new knowledge. Ba'atha with new knowledge. I hope that explains it. There are lots of questions. Unfortunately, the time is up and we're running into time limitation on my side too. Let's see. I'll take two more questions from Brother Shahid. New creation, could this result in a concept of parents in the Quran having much deeper meaning? Absolutely. Absolutely. We will see, inshallah, in the future when we talk about walidain. Walidain takes on many different dimensions. Once you open your mind, once you empty your cup and you start seeing the richness of the metaphorical language of the Quran, the Abrahamic locution again, the metaphorical, unlimited applicability of those metaphors, you start seeing all sorts of possibilities. And this truly makes the Quran unique in the sense that it's available to every generation, every time, every geography, every time, every population, because they all see different metaphors and metaphorical applications. Okay, the last question from Brother Mustafa. Well, I'll take one from Brother Sal. Couldn't Muhammad be a good qareen for us today? Well, the concept of good qareen doesn't apply, but malaika, absolutely. Malaika, yes, absolutely. And there is a strong reason to believe that. Brother Mustafa, regarding other cultures, we are here to learn and teach, in this case, the other cultures, bi'idhnillah, and learn from other cultures. Because no one says that knowledge is exclusive to the believers. The Quran never says that. As a matter of fact, go back to the segment about Surah An-Nahl, the bees. Allah teaches us, go and seek from every source, of knowledge, but then come back and trim it and coordinate what you learned and kind of frame it, whether or not it's acceptable, according to what the Quran provides us in terms of its principles. So we'll take the last question from KIA. Is it relevant to 7 repetitions? Where is it told by interpreters as Fatiha? No, it has nothing to do. So sometimes the number 7 is repeating in many different places, and it doesn't mean it's a marking. It does not mean it's a marking. We've seen this before. Sometimes we have a seeming marking, and that only gives us plausibility. Absolutely, not proof. We have to prove it using the validation and verification. And that's what we do using the organic Quranic methodology. So make sure you understand that. Just because the number 7 repeats, it doesn't mean it's a marking. Let's see. We'll take one last question. Why Allah uses we as in khalaqna instead of I? And I think you should know the answer by now, because we've been talking about co-creation, reciprocation. Well, what does that mean, Dr. Hani? We, not just Allah. Yeah, it's not the majestic we. It's literally including hands, malaika, actors, agents who cooperate on behalf of Allah, cooperate among themselves and cooperate with us to make things happen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about a whole bunch of supporters under his command doing all types of work as part of this whole cycle that we just described. All right, we are done. The time is up. I really appreciate your patience. I know you will get to watch this again and again, probably. This is really full of information, and I truly hope that this has been beneficial to you. I had a lot of fun preparing it, and I had a lot of fun presenting it. As you can tell, my voice is almost gone. I thank all of you for being so patient. Please, again, subscribe to www.marvelousquran.org if you have not already done so. Subscribe to our channel, Marvelous Quran, on YouTube. Please place some comments. It helps us with the algorithm. And join me, inshallah, in the dua that we make in closing. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق. Thank you so much. السلام عليكم.